It's really nice to see some of you. Hi, Leslie. How are you? And Jimmy. Yeah. What's up, Anna? And I recognize some folks from the Finding Mastery Tribe. Hello. Kevin. What's happening? Julie. Okay. So, I would love if we could just start with just um, a bit of a frame about what I want to share with you guys. And I'm designed this more to be a conversation than certain a sage on the stage type of thing. It makes me nauseated to think about those types of experiences. And so could we just start with maybe a chat, like where in the planet are you? And to get a sense of our community that's on today. And if you've got a question, this is a way to maybe prime us. So where you're from in the world, and then maybe a question that you're interested in me addressing. And the way that I'll get us started is first by saying, I just want to acknowledge what a incredibly emotionally electric and important and charged and important, I said that twice now, important time that we're in. And I think we're all a bit lost for words on how to exactly express our experiences in the world that are happening right now. And I'm talking about everything from the challenges of COVID and the challenges of injustice. So I just want to honor that. And I want to come full circle by saying that from SDOIS, I was first introduced to mindfulness, and that was about 20 years ago. And I've been practicing since, and I'm incredibly grateful for exposure to that and the application of it and how it can be applied. And so I just want to come full circle and say it's been a really important part of my practice. It's been an important part of my journey in life, my adventure in life. And I learned it here through SDOIS. So I just want to make a note of that. And maybe at some point in our conversation today, we'll talk about how mindfulness works and for me and how I'm sharing it. And all that being said is that what I want to do today is I don't have answers, right? I'm not going to pretend to do that. But I do want to frame and shape a conversation so that we can wrestle with some stuff. And there's two basic ways that I think about how to wrestle, right? Which is acknowledge that there's there's no expertise here, but we're trying to all figure it out. And or that expertise kind of heavy top-down approach, which we're not going to do. And there's three things as humans that we can train. We can train our thoughts, we can train our craft, and we can train our mind. And folks that have had the opportunity to think about that framework, because it's a luxury in many respects to think about training when some people are thinking about survival, is that at the intersection of elite performance, what is it that we're doing for them? What is it that we're actually materially doing for people that are wanting to explore their potential? Well, hopefully, in my mind, we're doing one of two things, is that we're having conversations about self-discovery, and we're having conversations about how to actually train your mind. And the training of the mind is no different than how we train our body. It's sets and reps. And so that sets and reps makes it more tangible. And so at some intersections, it's a really important part of our work, is making it tangible, putting handles on this inner world that we're talking about. Okay, so as you guys are sharing where you're from, I just want to take a quick look. So we got California, Calgary, Vancouver, Arizona, the Bronx, South Dakota. Good. All right, Portland. Okay, so it seems like it's mostly a US population with some Canada mixed in there. All right, good to know. Okay, so let's get into the weeds just a little bit here on this framing. Again, one is self-discovery and mental skills, those two ways to think about it. The next way that I want to talk about it is, or what we're going to talk about is this adventure discovery process. When we double click under that, it really is philosophical in nature, much more than it is about psychological strategies and skills. And inside of that philosophical position, you enter the conversation often. And so your philosophy, your framework, the way that you understand the world, how you ask questions, the biases that you hold, all of those are intertwined in that work. And so it's really important that we examine that. And I'm speaking to professionals, like people that are in the psychology field. And then I'm also thinking about the leaders that are athletes, and that are wanting to get better and making a difference in their communities. That self-discovery piece is paramount. So that being said, let's go ahead and frame up this conversation one step more into this idea. I'm going to share a deck here, is that there are no hacks. There are no shortcuts. There's no secrets or tricks or tips. There's none of that in this world when we're thinking about pursuing mastery. And when I think about mastery, I think of it like, well, one, what is mastery? It's the artistic expression of the nuances of either self or craft. And so that artistic expression only happens when we've spent enough time in the woodshed chopping wood to really understand all of the nuances, either of self or craft or both. There are no shortcuts here. And so it is a fundamental orientation towards a particular aim. And that fundamental orientation is actually how I think about how I want to spend my life. And then it's nothing I learned in the books. It's really observing, how do the best in the world become? And I think we make a fundamental mistake when we think about heralding the greats because of the hardware, the podiums that they get to stand on. The greats, what we can learn from them is, how do they organize their life? And so in that process, when they're the way that they organize their life, I think that that's what we can learn. And in these times of uncertainty with emotional importance that we're feeling right now, is the structure is actually, I think, as important, if not more important than anything else, about how do we create systems for us to figure things out. And then from that structure, the hope is that we break structure. And then therein lies what the artistic expression is really about. So for some of folks that have not, I haven't had the chance to meet or be part of your community or vice versa, is that this is a bit of my journey. The stuff that I'm talking about with you today, it's influenced by these types of men and women. And so it is really pioneers and frontiers that are on the edges of real danger, real consequence, and certainly people that are pursuing their potential in off-access environments. So early in my career, it was traditional stick and ball sports. And then I found myself struggling with that community. And that was, let's call it 18 years ago, 20 years ago. And the reason I struggled with it is because I couldn't get past this almost abuse of a microphone. So these extraordinary athletes that have microphones put in their face, and they were talking more about themselves than they were talking about issues of humanity. And here we are, full circle. I'm so happy with what's taking place. So I found myself compelled to environments of consequence. And so I went into that world, and it is actually the world I came from. So action sports is where I cut my teeth as a young kid. And I never wanted to work with pro athletes. What I wanted to work with, or who I wanted to work with, were people that were almost burdened by this deep desire to figure out potential. And then if we were in environments that were pure, meaning when you make a mistake, there's real consequence, not consequence to ego or money, that we're going to get to the truth of things. And so that's where I spent 15 years at least, in these environments. And there are plenty of us that know this environment, but I'm just shaping where I've been compelled to want to understand. And then over the last handful of years, I think it's been 9 seasons now, I've been with the Seattle Seahawks with Coach Carroll and the team. And so I'm back to stick and ball sports. And the reason I came back was because Coach Carroll and I had a conversation, and a mutual friend put us together for dinner. Just, hey, you guys have like minds, like it'd be fun to see what you guys could create. And over that dinner, he was sharing how he wanted to go about building the Seattle Seahawks and shaping that culture. And it sounded like nothing I'd ever heard before. So he invited me to come up, and sure enough, it was fundamentally different. It was like year 1.5 for him. It was fundamentally different. And so it was this opportunity to explore, like I think of the places I go work as working laboratories, to try to get to a central question, to understand it better. And the central question was, what would it be like to be in complete lockstep from a philosophical position with the head coach who is relationship based? So what he has created, that I've been part of, is the Seattle Seahawks have created a culture that is relationship based. And so in a world where outcome is paramount, that we've actually double clicked on that and said, okay, well, how? And the how is that relationships are at the square zero or tier zero of this. And this insight that nobody does the extraordinary alone forces us to say, well, then if that's the case, how do we better do it together? What happens with most people is at the beginning of a season, or most teams, at the beginning of the season, they get their mission right, they get their this, that, and the other, they get all the right words on the walls, and there's a let's go get it. And then at the moments of real stress, people unlock their arms, and so that unlocking of arms is actually part of a biological system to save your own tail. And so in many respects, it feels like we're working against human nature, which is the path of least resistance. It's the shortcuts, hacks, tricks, tips. And it is also what happens at the moment of stress and pressure. And so we're trying to undo or override or regroove those two basic systems. And so that's kind of at the center of what we're trying to sort out. Now, that being said, I want to start with a basic question. So in the chat, if we can explore this just a bit, is like, what is a high performance mindset? And there's no simple answer here, but it'd be great if we could just flow a little bit on the chat. Like if right now, if you had to come up with an answer, how would you describe a high performance mindset? And here's some primes for you to think about. This is Cam Chancellor. He's a defensive player and he's alone with the ball. It's rare. Is that a high performance mindset? The thing that leads to this. Is a high performance mindset really about, doing the thing that is difficult, where you're scrappy, leaving it on the line, getting dirty, if you will, with it? Is that a high performance mindset? This is Carrie Walsh Jennings, who I've been fortunate enough to work over the last 4 Olympics with, or maybe it's 4 Olympics. If we would have been in this one, this would be 4. So this is Luke Akins. He jumped from a plane. This is the last project of consequence I worked on. He jumped from a plane at 30,000 feet, which is high. He needed oxygen. But more importantly, you can see he doesn't have a parachute. So he built a 16-story net, 100 by 100, that he needed to hit. And the outcome was completely binary. And you know what I mean by that? Like if he misses the target, really bad things are going to happen. So, and oftentimes people say, well, why would you work with crazy people? And at first blush, I took offense of it because that word is a stigma, right? For us trained in psychology. And then the way that I could try to reframe it is that he's doing exactly what the greatest mathematicians of, history have done, or physicists, is they're taking the next natural step, adding to the body of knowledge of their discipline, the thing that they've organized their life around. And so this is the human I want to be as well. I want to add to this amazingly complicated and beautiful science that I just hold dear. Like it is a incredible thing that we're studying here together, and that some of you spent your whole life studying. It's an incredible science. The challenge, though, is that it's invisible. And because of it's invisible, it makes the conversations difficult. And our challenge is to be as tangible as we can, but also live in the space of the non-tangibles. And just like we know gravity exists, but we can't see it, so do we also know that the mind exists, but we can't see it. But we can see the artifact of both. We can see the leave behind. And so that artifact is a really important part of our trying to understand what works and what doesn't work. You know, and when I think about a high performance mindset, I think about like, it's not just in these moments of extreme, like, can we do it in the city? Can we have that approach to life in the city? And, you know, I think we're missing something if it's just about the moments that we celebrate. You know, it's really about these moments when we're by ourselves, but also when we're at the edges of our potential, and at the same time when we're in the community of everyday life, as well as Alex Honnold and some of the stuff he's doing. I think Alex Honnold, if you're not familiar with his work, it's worth checking out. I think he's the most significant athlete of our time, because of where he's taken his mind. And to a sheer cliff of 3,000 feet and no ropes, no assistance, just his hands, his feet, and his mind in the most ancient of ways being tested and tried is a significant contribution to what is possible and how he's done it. And so I just want to put a note there. So many of you might be familiar with this work I did with the Red Bull Stratus program, where Felix jumped from outer space at 130,000 feet. And so when you start thinking about what is a high performance mindset, you know, what goes into these types of men and women that are doing these events. And oftentimes when we see these images that are on the screen now, is we recognize how difficult it is, but what precedes the moments of contemplation? You know, what do we do with our insights? And fundamentally organizing our life towards wisdom, towards not just this shorter version of humans, which is high performance. And the way I think of the shorter version versus the longer version is that mastery and artistic expression is somewhere up here, but what is above that is wisdom, like this path towards wisdom, then mastery, and then we're thinking about underneath of that high performance, then performance underneath that, and underneath that there's like sub-performance. And that tends to be where we spend much of our time, thinking about avoiding sub-performance. And the sub-performance piece is, you know, it's real. It's important for us to understand. And it's important that we're there and we have some tools and strategies to help people. At the same time, holding this higher standard of what is possible. And the only way that we're going to figure out what's possible is by helping people live in the present moment more often. And if we can help them do that in environments of consequence, and sometimes those consequences are like in the boardroom, and sometimes they're in the living room, and sometimes they're, you know, like in places that we don't normally think about. But being able to be present in those environments under any condition is a prerequisite, I think, to enter into this place of mastery. Okay, so there's two basic buckets: awareness and psychological skills, the self-discovery process. And that's the internal life for me, like increasing awareness so that we can have insights, so that we can turn those insights into wisdom. And then the psychological skills are things that will backfill us, that will help us be able to be in the present moment more often, so that we can have the insights or experience the insights and then put them into action, wisdom and otherwise. So I want to share a quick little model, and then I'm going to stop talking. Coach Carroll and I, about year 3, head coach of the Seahawks, at about year, maybe it was 2, actually, he comes flying out of his office, and we're at the training center in Seattle, and he comes flying out of his office. The energy is electric, and it's a really fun environment in a lot of ways. But he's got music blaring in his office, and down the hall, the GM's got completely different music blaring, and we love it. We love all of it. The celebration of the uniqueness of the person is part of it, and the environment is electric. He comes flying out of his office and he goes, "Mike, can you feel this?" And what he was talking about was not the music. It wasn't like that. It was 100 and some alpha competitors have their nose pointed in the same direction. So he was talking about culture. He was talking about the togetherness that we had. Now, this was 2 months, probably about 2 months going into our first Super Bowl. And I looked at him kind of wide-eyed, you know, like bright-eyed, like, yeah. And he says, like, without skipping a beat, "Do you think anyone outside of sport would be interested in what we're doing?" And about a half beat goes by, and he goes, "Let's just write it down." And so I was like, yeah. And so back of a napkin, we wrote down his stuff and then my stuff and the stuff we were doing together. And his stuff is really about how to create a culture where people can do their very best work. And then my stuff is about the path of discovery as well as the psychological skills so they can do their best work when they're tested and tried. And so we wrote it on the back of a napkin. We called the CEO of Microsoft. He was like a friend of the court, and a business took off from there. So I want to share the model that we built. This is our logo, but it was built intentionally here. And so we've got some 5 factors. So self-discovery is the main factor that we work from, and it's the center of it. But then outside of that, we got mental skills that we'll teach. We've got psychological frameworks that will help people build. We've got a recovery process, the science and the art of recovery. And mindfulness is the golden thread that runs through the whole thing. And so, like, when I talk about these things, you know, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I just want to give you a framework, right? The inside, if you can see the screen, the inside stuff, the self-discovery is like defining what is high performance. What's a high performing mindset? What is success is an old way of thinking about it. What is your personal philosophy? And we walk people through those pillars. Like, what are the principles that guide you, that guide your thoughts, your words, and your actions? What are those principles? And can you get it down into such a way that you could get it out under duress, that you could live by it day to day, that you could explain it to your loved ones, that your loved ones be very clear about your personal philosophy? And so we walk them through a process of that and their character strengths, as well as like what vision did they hold for themselves. And then we get into the really basic kind of mindset skills: calm, confidence, focus, and trust. I mean, that's like, confidence is a skill. Okay, so what's the skill? Self-talk. How about it? It's that simple. And we all know that. Then what kind of self-talk? Well, it's got to be credible. Okay, well, how do we earn credible self-talk? Well, we've got to do some inventory. We've got to go back in our history and figure out, like, how have I been truly tested? Write that stuff down. And then, you know, chin check it every day. Is that real? Is it real? Have I earned the right to say this type of thing to myself? So I don't want to get too lost in the weeds, but that's not hard. That is the applying good science and helping people have credible self-talk, right? And so each one of these is block and tackle there. Same with the mindset skills. The psychological framework: control, optimism, grit. And those of you who are down the path on science here, you're recognizing this is 101. And that's where most people are. So it's great. Like, let's start with the basics and get some of those things right before we're trying to get into complicated stuff, you know? And then the last stuff is obviously about the systems of recovery, how to, in world sport, as most of you know, we talk way more about recovery than working hard. 98% of people on the world stage are working hard. That's what they're doing, right? Now, there are the 2% freaks that, I don't know, they've got a ridiculous 6-pack, they jump 42 inches, you know, they're strong as an ox, and they eat pizza, drink alcohol, you know, ripping this and that and the other. And like, it doesn't make any sense. And they're out there. And then mindfulness, like the science and the art of mindfulness, how does that really work? And how can you take that science and practice and fold it into a palatable way, into a intriguing way, into the environment that you're working in? So I just wanted to share that framework. It's very much a 101. It's the system that I have found to be really important as something to lean up against. All that being said, is self-discovery is really what makes a person, not makes, that's not the right word. It's the deep work that's continually unfolding. And so when Dr. Versari asked me to be part of what we're doing here, you know, it was first in response to COVID. And now it's something much more than that. That being said, it still is about the unfolding, uncertain moments that we're holding together. And this is not by the way, I don't think that there's such a thing. There's not really, for me, I can't understand it yet. So hopefully you can teach me that there's a mental challenge, you know, like mental toughness. I don't get that. I do get emotional like the real test is the emotional challenge, emotional toughness. Like, how emotionally flexible can I be? And I definitely get the thoughts between thoughts and emotions. Great thoughts, you know, can help facilitate emotions that will facilitate performance. Like, no kidding. But the real challenge seems to be emotional more than mental. For those that have done the work first, and we call it front loading. So we want to front load the mental skills. We want to front load the framework. We want to front load self-discovery and then run to the edges, run to the edge of capability, of capacity day in and day out, and then recover in a world-class way and be awake while we're doing it, be aware while we're doing it. So I just want to end this note and turn it over to questions and discussion. And I also, the note I want to end on is that I'm dislocated. You know, I feel dislocated based on the current experiences that I'm going through with myself, with my family, with people that I'm working with. And so it doesn't even feel like this is necessarily my normal rhythm, but it's not normal right now. So I'm sharing with you a bit more of a subdued, tamped down approach. And so that's a note that I just want to share with you as well. So that being said, let's get into some Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm happy to see where we can go. And that being said, maybe you can take your mic off, get into like the nuances of a question, double click once if I can't get there, and then let's pass the mic on to somebody else.
Yo, Mike.
Oh, Don Peters. I knew it was coming. Yeah. How are you, Don?
I just like to say something that I've been threatening you with for a long, long time. I'm sitting in the back of the room and I say, I'm not willing to grant any of that, meaning don't believe what you said. And that's just so 180 of what I really feel. It's just wonderful. That's wonderful. I got a very quick Mike Gervais story that will underscore mindfulness in a way that I doubt you would say it, because just look, you're with Seattle Seahawks, Super Bowl. They got one play to win the Super Bowl. Everybody who knows football knows about the play. For those who don't know, Seattle's on the what, 4-yard line, 3-yard line, and they score, they win. 1-yard line, they score, they win. Pete Carroll calls what would then be called a very curious play, because he didn't go to Marshawn Lynch, the beast, this guy that can run through a wall. He decided a short pass over the middle, and I would later find out it wasn't nearly as stupid a call as many people thought. As a matter of fact, the guy was open for a split second, but another guy was more prepared, and so he intercepted the ball, and Seattle loses the Super Bowl. Now, I'm standing there in my living room. I got my Saints gear on, and I'm watching this thing, and I knew I was going to give you some time because you're in the middle of the biggest, most incredible, moneyed sports moment there is on this planet, right in the middle of it. So I wondered if I should ask about it. And I just said, I texted you and I said, dude, kind of a curious call, huh? Do you remember what you texted back?
No, I'm kind of dying over here waiting. Yeah, like, what did I say?
In the middle of the biggest sports moment, money, emotion, work, in the middle of all of it, you said, yeah, good thing it's just a game, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Good thing it's just a game. Now, if your coach were anybody but Pete Carroll, I wouldn't have told that story, because he wouldn't have understood it. He would say, oh, Gervais doesn't care whether we win or lose. No. Good thing it's just a game. And we had found out some ball players were facing cancer, and we found out other things that were much more important than that. But that's the most important thing. I've taught every time I teach. I teach that that's what happens. So I just love to hear you. Love to see you. Everybody sees how pretty he is, right? Everybody see how pretty Mike is.
Oh God, here we
Pretty
go. Can't get away from it.
Hey, listen, I'm telling you, you know, it makes Tom Cruise look all ugly. He's so pretty. I'm telling you this. I've walked through an airport with Mike before, and when I do that, I get a sense of how a piece of furniture must feel.
Oh my God.
So head on, man. Teach
Hey,
it.
man. I love you, Don. I appreciate you. Thank you. Yeah. So I think that perspective, it can't be bought, and each one of us have a unique perspective in life. And part of our job is to be completely authentic ourselves across conditions. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to start with some of the environments of consequence, because sport is a luxury. It is not an essential part of the, like the workforce now. It's a complete luxury with made up rules. And when we lose, in war, go back long ago, in war, maybe our families were taken, or, killed and whatever. So that's the dramatic part. And then also in the environments of consequence and even modern times when people make mistakes, like sometimes they don't come back. And I'll tell you a quick little story that really shaped me is that I was working with, of course, I'm going to keep all the names out, but it was a backcountry snow athlete. And he says, Mike, I just got to tell you, I got to understand first before we go any further. Do you know what it's like to pack your gear when you're about to go do the expedition, so that and there's like 3-4 of us at the top of the mountain, pack your gear so that your friends don't have to pack your gear for you if you don't come back? I said, okay. So imagine orientating your life that way. And it's really powerful. Like there's a meditation, an active meditation I do every day. I try to do with as many people as I can, is when I say goodbye, it might be the last time I see you. And I just want to hold that for a moment. And like, it might be the last time. And so it's a really important thing I think for us to hold the fragility of the moment. And that's the only way that I really understand to help people get compelled to want to have more of them, to be in them more often, the present moment. So if you thin slice your day, you've got lots of moments. And we know this from research, is that from flow state, the zone, the pocket, as musicians call it, is that deep focus is an entryway into flow state. But really what deep focus does, it allows you to be in the present moment. When you string a handful of them together, then you can somehow accidentally slip into that state where it starts to click and make sense. And so thank you, Don, for bringing that up. And yeah, there we go. Okay, so what else we got? What else we got here? Mic's off. It's way better. Yes.
Hi, Mike. It's great to see you.
Hi.
I have
What's
a
up,
question.
Leslie?
So I'm in charge of our CHAMPS, our support program for our student athletes at our community college. And then I also train 3 local high school teams in the South Bay area. And so we've been doing our workouts via Zoom, and it's finals time, and it's just a tough time right now. So, how do you help? I'm in partnership with all these young athletes to help them perform at their highest level, right? But then if they have finals, they have COVID, they have, injustice, they have all these things. Like a lot of my high school athletes gathered like in Torrance, and they did the rally on Sunday, and they're speaking up and they're doing all these things. What's the best way I can support them via this time? We just got done with our Zoom workouts, and like we're working out, but it's like I know there's other stuff to address or to talk about, and I just don't know the proper way to be present for them so that they can be at their highest performance during this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you, Leslie. I would add, I want to share an example, and then I would add that the fact that you're asking that question is probably the right, you're probably doing just great because you're concerned, and you're connected to them, and you're coming from an empathetic framework, and you're probably doing just fine. It's a general thought. And that being said, saying that oftentimes is so magical, like using yourself. Whenever I get in trouble, and Dr. Versari, I think you played an important part in this with, Walt and Don. I think you'll appreciate that when I was in school with you guys, is that whenever you're in trouble, or not in trouble, but whenever you're a bit lost, remember to come back to the room. And so come back to processing what's happening right now and what is in the room right now. And so part of that is sometimes sharing your experience. And sometimes that's like asking what they're feeling. And so that's just that empathetic connection and being true and real and honest. And if we could model anything, I would say, I hope we're modeling authenticity. Now, that being said, I want to kind of challenge all of us that are in this sport world, right? Which is, for so long that you can't find an athlete or coach that doesn't nod their head to say, oh yeah, the mental part of the game is important. And you say, great, where's the schedule for it? What part of the week are we doing mental training? Right? You can't find it. And so it's really hard to find it. Okay. So what if you took that position of leadership and you did just that, is that you folded in 2, 3, 4 minutes at the top and you hit something, maybe call it a mindfulness, call it a breathing, call it a check-in, call it a review of self-talk, whatever it might be. But if you folded it in, and so there's some sort of integrated approach between physical training, technical training, and mental training. And we moved from that concept into application at the Seahawks, which has been really fun to see Coach Carroll do it. And he's been doing it probably his whole career, but at the top of just about every meeting. And so you imagine, I don't know, 100 and so athletes and coaches at the top, he's going to talk about something. Either he's teaching a mental skill, or he's telling a story about the mental part of the game that he's capturing it, or he's doing something to honor the inner world. And it's at the top. And so he folds in an integrated way across the culture, something at the top of his meetings about the value of the mind. And literally it might be as concrete as, hey, here's a definition of a mental skill. And then he gives the definition and he says, this is one way we can train it. And then today, let's be great at this mental skill at practice. Ready? Okay, here we go. And, run out the door. Super mechanical. And I've seen it work in really fun ways. So maybe that's something to consider as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
Gervais, kind of on that topic, it seems to me that the NFL is a little bit behind in the mental performance piece in comparison to Major League Baseball or some of the other sports. And I can't wrap my brain around it. Do you have any insight on why maybe not everyone is looking into this piece?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that baseball's done a great job. They've done a really nice job. And there's challenges that they're trying to sort out as well, and they're finding their way, but they're definitely ahead of the curve. And so I think the question, Levi, that you're asking is like, why is football taking longer? I don't have a great answer. It's probably more of a reflection of the top-down approach in traditional football. It's very much a command approach, and it probably speaks something about the coaches not wanting to give up that portion of their coaching style or their coaching approach. And so there's probably something there. And so I will say, though, that while it was very hard to find somebody in the NFL handfuls of years ago, now each team has a team clinician. And so they're required to be in the building 8 hours a week or at a minimum. And so they're moving in that direction from a mental health perspective, which is, it's great. We have a team clinician at the Seahawks that is block and tackling all of the clinical work in nature. And so that's one. The second layer so that's the coaching kind of philosophy approach. The second, and I'll just note that it takes progressive coaches to change what traditionally has worked. It's amazing when they do that. Coach Carroll is one of those coaches that has done that. The second is that football doesn't have guaranteed money. And so if an athlete is going to talk about some stuff that it's hard to talk about, and maybe they become exposed for being weak, let's go back to old thinking, and there's not a guaranteed contract, and the person you're sharing it with potentially is making a decision weekly about your contract, there's a little bit more risk than guaranteed contract environments. And so there might be something there as well. So those are the two places that I would hunt to better understand it.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all that you do.
Appreciate you, Levi. I see your philosophy up in the feed too. There you
Thank you,
go.
man. Lead, baby.
Nice work. Okay, we got about 20 minutes left, 15 minutes left. So let's go, Spencer. What do we got?
All right. So my question is, do you think in your experience is self-help talk more beneficial when it's focused on the actual mechanics of what an athlete is doing or their self-efficacy in regards to doing it?
Yeah, good question. When I think of self-talk, I think one of the most least beneficial, okay, so it's not negative. So I try to oversimplify in my own mind how the mind works because it's complicated, right? But if we oversimplify the system, we say there's a negative mind and a positive mind and a no mind. Oversimplified. That if we're on that positive mind side of things, and when I say positive, I'm not saying like we're holding hands and like everything's wonderful. I'm talking about this like dogged, productive, sometimes like you're just hanging on by your fingernails type of like, okay, I'm staying in, I'm saying, okay, like the least dynamic part of that self-talk would be focusing on technique. And because it's like, it's an internal thing that we're focusing on as opposed to where the game is played, which is out here. And so it's an okay, it's better than, oh boy, here we go again. This again. I don't know, why am I even doing this? Like, you know, that kind of negative, if you will, or constricting narrative. So when we go negative and positive, I like to think about constricting and then expanding, you know, like things that create space, I should say. So technique is okay, but not great. And so maybe checking in there and then driving it up into something a bit more powerful, which would be more either motivational or something outside that is driving your focus to the external narrow. So I hope that helps, but it's better than some other stuff that you could be doing, but it's not the most dynamic. And I bet you already knew that when you asked the question.
No, I mean, thank you. That's more clarification.
Yeah, cool. Nice question.
Can you share a simple meditation practice that you use?
Oh, absolutely. I was actually wanting to do that with us today. Like I thought that we'd maybe do an 846, you know, like I thought maybe we do that, but yeah, I'm happy to do that. Let me just kind of go upstream for a moment. And on the upstream piece, I think it's really important that when we're down in the weeds on tactics, that if we go upstream, those tactics tend to flow a little bit easier, whether it's self-talk or it's mindfulness or whatever it is. But the higher upstream is like, well, what is your purpose? You know, what life purpose, if you will, purpose over the next 3 months, what the purpose of why you're engaging in the craft that you're engaging in, but like go way upstream to purpose. And if I just drop down underneath of that and like, what's the purpose of mindfulness? Well, it really is a self-discovery process. And it is to train the ability to refocus. So I don't think about it as a focus training or concentration. I know there's a lot of literature there, but I think about it's the art of starting over 1,000 times. So it's really a refocusing training. Okay, so there's two basic types. There's single point focus, mindfulness, and then there is contemplative. And so the contemplative is a bit more like, it's the open monitoring, it's the exploring of thoughts, how one thought leads to another, how that thought stream and the emotional stream connected to it, how they're working together. And so it's really non-judgmentally, non-critically watching, learning, observing, right? And so if I said that to you, you would probably be able to say, oh, well, how would I do that? Well, you would maybe start with a thought stem or a question like, who am I? What am I? Maybe you'd start with an emotion that you felt, and then earlier in the day or yesterday or whatever, or you just start the process and then just follow without trying to course, without trying to steer, without trying to critique, none of that. So I can share that. Like one of the more fun ones is like, who am I? And just starting there. And so this is fun. I was on a conversation with Deepak Chopra. I think it was like 3 weeks ago. And he's a legend. He is Harvard MD, like spiritual guru guy, like right on the edge of like really complicated thoughts. And so we're talking about this very question. And he goes, wrong question, Mike. It's not who am I? I go, huh? Because it's considered one of the ancient meditations. And he says, yeah, what am I? I said, oh, look at that. What am I? Okay. And so that's a simple example. Now, I don't do that. I don't start there with athletes. So I don't know where you are in your journey, if you will, but I think that the most mechanical place to start is on single point focus. And that single point focus is just, in many respects, it's explaining what meditation is not. It's not having thoughts, right? It's not bliss. That it's like trying to demystify what it is. It's like I said, the art of refocusing 1,000 times or starting over 1,000 times. And so the mechanical part of me, and I can hear Dr. Rutherford, who first introduced it to me, like kind of like looking and grinning at me, because I'll just get a timer out and I'll do one of two things. Is I'll just go until focusing on the inhale and the exhale until the timer runs out, or I just can't do it. Like it's so hard. And so that's mechanical, right? Single point focus, inhale and exhale is really a strong way to do it. Or, as I'm long-winded in this conversation, more contemplative. And then I will double click on that single point. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that it's not just an inhale and exhale. There's an inhale, a pause, and exhale, a pause. And there are 4 parts to breathing. And if you can double click on the science of breathing, I think it will serve you well. What really is diaphragm breathing? Like really, what is that? And then you can follow that rabbit hole to get really skilled on the mechanics of breathing. That's not what I'm talking about for mindfulness though, but I'm just saying if you go underneath of it, that might be a fun place to explore as well. I hope without giving you the exact tactic, I hope that can get you to a place that you can explore.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joshua.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question?
What's up, Julie?
Hi. Hey, to follow along with the mindfulness. So mindful school certified, been teaching in the classroom a few years, K through 12, work with athletes, have worked with a high school football team the past few years. The big question is, at what age would you start mindfulness? Not asking them, obviously, 8-year-old soccer players to say, who am I? But, just basic breathing, counting the breath, maybe starting before practice, stuff like that. I've just had some parents ask me, so.
Yeah. So I have an 11-year-old son, and when he was about 3 or 4, so early is my answer. So at a very young age, 2-ish, 3-ish, I was just doing it next to him, and we just lay in bed, and I was just doing it. And it was just nice for us to be together. And, so like kind of modeling it that way. And then as he got a little bit older, I just put a stuffed animal on his stomach. And I said, hey, let's breathe and just watch. And then I would add a challenge and see his, the stuffed animal go up and down. And I'd say, let's see if we could slow it up, and like have some fun that way and kind of create a challenge around it. And so early, and modeling it in the morning or at night or whenever you do it is probably as important as like sitting down and doing it with him or her. But then when you do it with him or her, you can start really, really young. And then for the athletes, I would say, if you've got the ability to help the coaching staff value it and they're carving out time, that if you can, one of the things we like to do, and it doesn't happen as often as probably anyone on this call would like, is that after practice is maybe a great way to do it. I'm not so sure. I'm not convinced. I haven't seen any literature that pre-practice, it actually is facilitative. But certainly post could be a cool way to do it. Literature will support us that morning is a bit better, but that's really not grounded either. And so one of the things we used to do when I was fortunate enough to work with some fighters is that after practice, they throw a towel over their head. And it was this international signal, to the room, international, like the 12 of us, that, okay, I'm doing my work. And the towel over the head was like, I'm going in. And So we just kind of created that space for post-practice. So maybe there's a few things in there that you can play with.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Okay, we've got 7 minutes left. What else we got? Jessica. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, nice to see you. So I work with pro female tennis players, and I just have a quick question because this applies to kind of, I think, everybody in the world right now, or many people, that I'm seeing so many people come to me very desperate, like, how do I maintain my quest for mastery when my full identity has been shaken? And as you said, the non-essentialness of an athlete, a pro athlete even, do I have a job even? Does it matter? Do I matter? My whole life I've been just this, and now it really, it's slamming me in the face that really it doesn't mean anything ultimately. Again, I'm not saying that's true, but that's what the kind of people are contemplating at this time, the ones that I'm working with. And I see that in conversations with others as well, not just the athletes I work with. So I just wanted to know your thoughts, if you have any, about that issue of identity.
I think that you're hitting on something that's incredibly important, is that identity is like foundational. And there's this model I think many of us have bought and have consumed and swallowed, which is, I need to do more to be more. I need to do the extraordinary to be extraordinary. And we've got technology that flame that really well, Instagram-esque, you know, like that technology flamed, I need to do the extraordinary and show the extraordinary to be extraordinary. And that's really an identity piece. And what I'm observing is this flip. And from the tip of the arrow folks, and they're flipping it saying, no, this isn't right. And I'm not saying this is across all best of the best or whatever, like not by any means, but there is a flipping that's taking place, which is, I need to be more and let the doing flow from there. So I need to be more me, be more creative, more grounded, more present, more authentic. And from that being, let, you know, notice and get the doing to flow from that point. So your point is like, there's a crisis happening for somebody, an internal crisis. And it's because many of us, if we go back to some developmental psychology, when we were building our identity, if somebody in your community was highly skilled and it was at that, say, that sweet spot between 12 and, 19, 18 in that identity formation phase, we think about Erickson right now, is that role confusion versus identity, that if they foreclose on their identity because their coaches, their uncles, their aunts, their teachers, their parents, their siblings, their friends talked about them as being an athlete, and they gated out all the other stuff, right? Gated out like conversations about, oh yeah, academics too. Oh yeah. I mean, right? But they gated out like the musical part of them. They gated out the science part. They gated all these other things out because they were fascinated by how good this kid was. And it's exciting, and they mean well, of course. And so there's an identity foreclosure that takes place. And so I think part of our work is to help athletes decouple who they are from what they do. And helping them literally like decouple that is this incredible freedom on the other side. And I would say that for us to do that work, all of us on this call in this community is like, okay, how do I decouple who I am from what I do? And so that goes back to the mindfulness question, like, who am I that we're talking about with Joshua? Like, who am I? God, I love these questions. I mean, it's really rich, Jessica, Joshua. It's really rich.
Hey, Mike, can I add to that for 1 second?
Please do.
Do you mind if I just expand that?
Please, we have 4 minutes.
4 minutes, I can do it in one. I took that approach for a while, and then I also discovered the reverse. Decoupling is one way to do it, and I found also with some of the people that I work with that if you reverse it and say, I'm not just an athlete, I am my sport, and what I've been doing is a pinpoint on what my sport is. So if my life is my sport, what am I not seeing that my sport is, that I could be in? So it's an expansive.
Mm.
So in a sense, it's decoupling, but going beyond the, oh, I'm not my sport, to what am I missing about my sport that I could be seeing myself doing?
Yeah, all that perspective shifting work is so important, for sure. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so listen, I want to just say thank you. His questions are awesome. Community is important. Nobody does it alone. And it's great to get heckled from Don. I always will appreciate that. And so, like, if I'm trying to figure it out too, okay? And I want to say thank you for including me in this community, and SDUIS was really important for me. And so, I got to learn from some of the best, and that has been indelible. And I hope that you have people in your roundtable, whether you talk to them regularly or not, that they occupy a big part of your heart and your mind. And so I just want to say thank you to Dr. Versari for shaping and creating a platform for something that was really important for me. And so all that being said is, let's extend this. And I'd love for you to, get involved in finding mastery in what we're doing over there on the podcast, and trying to sort out some insights there. So if you're not familiar with that podcast, like, I'd love for you to join and be part of that community. And so I just want to say thank you.
Thank you.